Thursday always seemed like an ordinary day to him, neither good nor bad. Just another stepping stone on the way to the weekend. But it was on this Thursday that something inside clicked. He stared at the phone screen for a long time, wondering if he should write to his wife. One thought, strange and not entirely clear, made him act. What if I pick her up from training today? She said she had a Pilates class at 6 in the evening. Her new passion, she explained, promised to strengthen muscles and increase flexibility. But lately she has become too involved in these workouts. He decided not to warn her. Maybe it will be a pleasant surprise. Or maybe he will understand why he is bothered by a strange feeling in his chest. 15 minutes later, he was in the parking lot in front of the studio, sparkling in the light of the streetlights with raindrops on the windshield. He dialed her number, looking at the massive glass doors of the building, but there was no answer. He sent a message. "I'm here, waiting for you downstairs. Shall we have dinner?" A minute passed, then 5, then 10. No response. His hand tightened on the steering wheel. The rain outside the window intensified, drumming on the glass as if counting down the seconds. He looked at the phone again. No notifications. Then he took a deep breath and decided to go up to the studio himself. The lobby was quiet. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint scent of chlorine. The young girl at the reception smiled amiably and pointed to the stairs. "The second door on the left," she added with a slight smile, which he did not attach importance to, but her expression would soon seem suspicious. He climbed the stairs, feeling a growing unease inside. When he got to the right door, he heard a muffled laugh, barely audible through the sound of ventilation. My heart started beating faster. He opened the door cautiously. The room was dimly lit. Only the flickering light of the lamps reflected in the mirrors on the walls. In front are rows of neatly folded mats, and in the corner is his wife. She was lying on the floor with her legs bent in a strange position, with a rubber band wrapped around her hips. And above her, as if sculpted from marble, stood a man with short brown hair and pronounced muscles. Marco. His hands were touching her in a way that couldn't be overlooked. Too intimate, too homely. He froze, not believing his own eyes. His wife was laughing, and her voice was soft and full of tenderness, in a way she hadn't spoken to him in a long time. The coach leaned closer to her. Their movements became explicit, and the boundaries disappeared. He hid behind a stack of mats, clenching his fists to white knuckles. His breathing became heavy, and it seemed as if all the air in the room had disappeared. The world froze for a few moments. The sound of his name, soft and careful, like a whisper in the wind, brought him back to reality. "Are you okay?" The woman standing behind him asked. She looked worried when she noticed his frozen face and trembling hands. He didn't answer. His chest was filled with anger, but a plan was already spinning in his head. "They don't know I'm here. They think everything is under control. But this is just the beginning." He nodded to the woman and slipped out of the room, his steps fast, almost soundless. On the way back to the car, his mind worked like a precise mechanism. The images he had just seen remained in front of his eyes, but with them came one thought: they will pay. I'll make them both regret it. Back to the car. He got behind the wheel and gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to calm down. My palms were sweating, and my breathing was harsh. The sound of the engine starting was like a signal for the start of the hunt. All the way home, he thought about exactly what to do. Emotions were pounding inside him, like trapped animals. He wanted to scream, but he restrained himself. Jealousy is a bad advisor. I have to act coolly and accurately. After parking at the house, he sat in the dark of the car for a long time, looking at the light in the windows. The wife will come home later, with her tight smile and excuses. But now everything has changed. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Let her think she's still in control. Let him believe for a minute that I don't know anything. "Hi, it's me," he said when he heard her voice on the answering machine. "I wanted to remind you that I'm waiting for you at home." He disconnected the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Then he smiled for the first time all evening. Now the game has begun. He was sitting in the kitchen, not taking his eyes off the newspaper strip, although he was not reading anything. Each letter blurred, turning into meaningless lines and spots. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. almost mockingly, adding fuel to the fire of his expectation with every second. The door slammed softly, but in the echoing silence of the house, the sound sounded like a hammer blow. He didn't look up. Her footsteps sounded cautious, as if she was walking through a minefield. Leia stopped in the doorway, meeting his gaze. At that moment, something clicked like a trigger. "Hi, Jack." Her voice was too cheerful, as if it could smooth over reality. "You got up early. Everything okay?" He folded the newspaper with cold precision, looked up, and said softly, "I've been waiting for you. You came back late from training." She froze in place, the coffee cup in her hands shook, and a few drops splashed onto the floor. Yes, the lesson was delayed. "You know how it is," she said, taking a sip, but her voice sounded strained. Jack got up from the table, slowly coming closer. There was a dangerous silence in his movements, like a predator about to deliver the final blow. "Oh, I know. I saw it drag on." She froze, her eyes widened. The cup froze in her hands, but they were trembling treacherously. What do you mean?" He came very close so he could feel her breathing. "I was there. I saw you with him." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it made the words even sharper. "With Marco." Her face turned white. "Jack, it's not what you think. Not what I think." He grinned, but there was no warmth in his smile. "Your legs didn't wrap around him the way they wrap around a coach. I know what I saw." She took a step towards him, placing her hand on his forearm. "Jack, listen to me. Please let me explain myself. This is a mistake. This—" Her voice trembled, but he abruptly stepped back, throwing off her hand. "A mistake?" He snorted like he'd heard the worst joke of his life. "I forgot to pay for parking. It's a mistake. Leaving the light on is a mistake. But not this." She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled. He saw her pride crumble as she broke right in front of him. But his heart remained as cold as a block of ice. "I want a divorce, Leia." These words sounded like a sentence. There was a heavy pause in the air, as if time had stopped for a moment. "No, Jack, please. We can fix everything. We can go to the therapist, talk." She was desperately trying to find at least some opportunity, at least one chance for forgiveness. But he had already made up his mind. He took another step back, shielding himself from her like an invisible wall. "No. It's over between us." Her eyes filled with tears. She took one last step towards him, trying to find salvation in his cold gaze. "I love you, Jack. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you hurt, and I won't be able to forget it." He turned away, walking into the living room, where the light from the streetlights filtered through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Behind him, Leia knelt down, her soft sobs barely audible, like the wind outside the window. But he didn't turn around. Everything has already been decided. Jack stopped at the window, looking at the wet asphalt outside the window. The rain that had started in the evening was now pouring down in a solid wall, as if the weather shared his anger and devastation. Behind him, in the dim light of the kitchen, Leia was still sobbing, her fragile sobs seeming pathetic and useless. "Please, Jack." Her voice came again, trembling like a raw nerve. "At least give me a chance. You don't understand." He turned around, and his cold gaze silenced her in mid-sentence. "Are you asking for a chance? You had your chance, Leia, and you threw it away." She covered her face with her hands, and his gaze just swept over her, finding nothing but devastation. Like their marriage, it seemed broken, cracks were everywhere. He didn't feel sorry for her. Only anger boiled inside, like a storm ready to burst out. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay cool and focused. You can't give in to emotions. You can't make a mistake. Every word should be a weapon. "Tomorrow morning," he said in a flat voice, "I don't want you here. Pack your things and leave." "Jack, please." She jumped up from the floor as if she had been thrown into icy water. "We can fix everything." We were happy. He crossed his arms over his chest and took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "No barking. There won't be anything else. And I'm not going to let you ruin it in your own way. You made a choice, and now you have to live with it." Her eyes were glassy with tears, but she didn't back down. She reached out to him as if in a desperate attempt to hold on to their marriage, but he backed away. Her touch now only disgusted him. "I'll take care of the paperwork," he said, his voice colder than the autumn wind. "Tomorrow we will talk about how we will divide the property. But today, go to bed." She stood in front of him, trembling, her eyes full of tears, as if she could not believe that this was happening. But he wasn't going to stay trapped in her guilt anymore. Her pleas were late and unnecessary. "Go away, Leia." She turned slowly and staggered out of the kitchen. Her footsteps on the stairs were hollow and heavy, as if each step was harder than the last. She disappeared on the second floor, leaving him alone in the gloom of the living room. He sat down heavily on the sofa, his head spinning with anger and pain. All he saw were scenes that replayed over and over in his mind. Her laughter, her arms wrapped around Marco. Every detail came alive in my memory with frightening clarity. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into the skin of his palms. The pain seemed almost a relief to him, but it wasn't enough. The phone vibrated on the table, breaking the silence. He looked at the screen. It was her coach, Marco. The arrogance of this man knew no bounds. Jack rejected the challenge and, flushed with rage, strode around the living room, trying to pull himself together. But the anger refused to subside. This is not enough. One divorce is not enough. He needs something more, something that would make her and Marco regret what they had done forever. Jack didn't try to sleep again that night. He just sat in the dark, staring into space, and slowly, methodically considered every step. He will file for divorce tomorrow, but it won't end there. This is just the beginning. Jack stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. The skin on his face seemed pale, his gaze was hard, almost alien. He knew that this moment had changed him forever. It was too late to go back. The fog of thoughts cleared. A clear picture formed in his head, a plan that would allow him not only to survive the betrayal, but also to emerge victorious. And now every action must be precise and verified, like a move in a chess game. The first step, finance. He went to the office, where the laptop had been standing since the evening. Opening the banking app, Jack focused on the numbers. Just yesterday, all his accounts were shared, as they should be in a marriage based on trust. Now that trust had become his weakness, and he was going to fix it. A click of the keys, one by one, he froze all the shared accounts. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he created new accounts in his name. Her access will now be blocked. Her cards will stop working, and by the time she realizes it, it will be too late. He knew that this would be her first blow. She will have to face reality. Next step, notify your family. Jack knew that in such situations, you can't let the enemy take the initiative. We need to lay out the cards first, before Leia has time to come up with her own versions. He opened contacts and started texting her family and friends. "I am sad to inform you that our marriage with Leia is coming to an end. The reason is her betrayal, which I cannot forgive. I ask you not to bother me with requests for reconciliation. The decision is final. I hope for your understanding in this difficult time." He reread the text, making sure that there were no emotions in it, only facts. No hints, no threats, just a cold-blooded statement of the truth. Pressing the send button, he felt a brief flash of relief. Now her loved ones will know the truth, and she won't have time to lie. Jack found a studio number on the website and dialed it. The phone was picked up after the third ring. "Form and Strength Studio, how can I help you?" "Put me through to Marco," he said, trying to keep his voice level and calm. A few seconds later, a familiar voice came on the line, too confident, too carefree. "This is Marco. How can I help you?" "It's Jack," he replied, his voice dropping a tone. "Lai's husband." There was a short pause at the other end. Marco seemed to be trying to figure out what the conversation was about. "Listen, Jack, Marco began, but Jack interrupted him. "No, you're listening now. I saw everything that happened in the studio, and I'm not going to hush it up." He heard the coach exhale loudly, trying to keep his cool. "Look, it was a mistake. I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened." "A mistake?" Jack grinned into the phone. "I'm not going to listen to you. I'll contact the studio owner tomorrow morning and explain exactly how you violated professional boundaries." "Please don't. Let's settle this between us," Marco hastily interrupted. "No, you knew what you were doing. Now it's time to pay for it. Jack pressed the end call button, leaving Marco in silence. He knew that this call was just the first blow. The coach will have to face the consequences, which Jack will methodically start launching in the coming days. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the tension in his body recede. Everything was going according to plan. She will receive no money, no support from her family, no quiet life with Marco. The night was gradually coming to an end, but Jack did not feel tired. His mind was working like clockwork, working out new steps. He opened the to-do list and added the following item: meeting with a lawyer. Everything must be done on time and perfectly. He knew exactly what he wanted, and now nothing will stop him. Jack woke up early. A quiet dawn shrouded the house in gray light, as if reminding him that the world continues to spin, even when everything inside is torn apart. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, but this time it brought no comfort. He no longer sought solace. All he needed now was action. Meeting with a lawyer was the first step. He was sitting in the office of a lawyer, an elderly man with a bald head and prehensile eyes. There was a pile of documents on the table between them. "We can do this quickly," the lawyer said, flipping through the papers. "But we need to freeze any attempts to claim her property. The division of assets will be tough if she tries to hide something." "She won't get any assets," Jack said firmly. "Make sure that all loopholes are blocked." The lawyer nodded, typing something on his laptop. "We will submit the documents tomorrow. After that, the bark will be officially notified." Jack just nodded. Everything went according to plan, coolly and flawlessly. He left the office knowing that the legal part of his revenge had taken effect. The next step is to finish off Marco. After leaving the office, Jack opened his phone and checked to see if a new message had arrived. The incoming notification pierced his consciousness like a blow. It was a message from Marco. "Marco, Jack, don't go to extremes. Let's talk. If you trample me into the mud, it will end badly for everyone." Jack froze for a moment, staring at the screen. The threat was read between the lines, but it didn't scare him. On the contrary, it only inflamed his rage. He typed in the answer without hesitation. "You've already gone to hell, Marco. Prepare for the consequences." His fingers barely had time to put the phone in his pocket as he felt the determination boiling inside. But now he needed to act even faster. He returned to the car, ready to pull off the last move that would bring down an avalanche on the coach. Halfway home, his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen. This time it was barking. Jack slowly picked up the phone. "Jack, please, we need to talk." Her voice was shaky and scared. "Marco said you were going to ruin his career. He could do something terrible. He should have thought of that sooner," Jack replied calmly. "You knew what you were risking when you did it. Please, Jack, stop. It won't bring you anything but trouble. He's threatening." Her voice broke off in a sob. "He wasn't threatening me. He was threatening himself." Jack replied coldly and ended the call. Jack parked outside the studio and checked his phone again. He went to the studio's website and wrote a complaint to the management department. The message was short but deadly accurate. He described the situation in detail, pointed out the violation of professional boundaries, and threatened that he was ready to provide evidence of their affair. "If this is not resolved immediately, I will have to contact the local press with materials that will damage the reputation of the studio," he wrote, sending the letter. The coach didn't know that Jack was already 2 steps ahead. With this final move, Jack put the phone down on the seat and closed his eyes. The satisfaction of precise actions, of the coherence of the plan, all this brought a strange, cold pleasure. He knew that both Leia and Marco would feel the consequences very soon. But Jack wouldn't stop even here. After all, this was just the beginning. 2 weeks have passed. Everything was put in place. The divorce gained legal force, her accounts were blocked, and Marco lost his job after the scandal broke out. Every step was calculated precisely and coldly. Jack was sitting in the kitchen, enjoying a rare morning of silence. The house seemed different, empty but not lonely. The silence now brought peace. His phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, a message from a lawyer. "Everything is complete. The marriage is officially dissolved. The documents are valid." He smiled, but there was no joy in that smile. Only satisfaction, like after a job well done. He didn't need anything else. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, enjoying the thought that the game was over. That evening, Jack went outside to throw out the trash. Leia was standing at his doorstep. She looked haggard and broken, with dark circles under her eyes and a tired expression on her face. "Jack," she began, barely audible. "What are you doing here?" "What is it?" he asked without a trace of emotion. "I wanted to say." She hesitated, trying to find the words. "I know I deserve it, but I needed to apologize. Not for the sake of forgiveness. Simply for myself." She took a step closer, but he didn't move. "I've lost everything. Marco dumped me, and I know it's fair. But I want you to know that I really loved you. I just did something stupid." Jack looked at her. There was no anger or pain in his eyes, just fatigue. "You've made your choice, Leia, and I made mine." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, accepting this cold verdict. "Goodbye, Jack," she whispered. He nodded without saying a word and closed the door behind her. That evening, he opened a bottle of whiskey and sat on the sofa, looking out the window at the city that was living its life. The game is over. Leia is gone. Marco lost everything. He won. But with this victory came the realization: revenge does not bring happiness. It just leaves a void in its wake. He drank the last sip, feeling the alcohol flow through his veins, and closed his eyes. Now there was only a new day ahead, a new path that he had to choose. For the first time in a long time, he was free. And perhaps this freedom was the best outcome. And that's where we come to the end of our story today. If you liked this story and aroused your emotions, please support us with likes and share your impressions in the comments. Your reactions help our stories spread through algorithms. If this is your first time on our channel, join our community by clicking on the subscribe button. This inspires us to create new, interesting stories for you. Thank you for watching the video to the very end. We are waiting for you in the next issue.